To the casual observer, she was just another kid flying solo, a footnote on the passenger manifest. The cabin crew saw a child to be managed, offering her a can of ginger ale and a bag of pretzels with professionally kind yet dismissive smiles. But when a shadow fell across their Boeing 787 Dreamliner at 39,000 feet, when a flight of unidentified jets appeared with hostile intent and sleek F-35 Lightning IIs were scrambled to intercept, the unassuming 11-year-old girl in seat 28A would prove she was something else entirely. She was the inheritor of the famed Ghost legacy, and she was the only one who could save them all. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from. Now back to our story. The Dreamliner, a marvel of modern aerospace engineering, sliced through the thin, cold air over the sprawling heartland of America. Sunlight, harsh and unfiltered at this altitude, streamed through the electronically dimmable windows, painting long rectangles of light across the cabin. For the 288 souls on board, this was supposed to be a routine 5-hour flight from Los Angeles International to Chicago O'Hare, a mundane commute through the sky. The cabin was a symphony of modern travel, the gentle, pervasive hum of the twin General Electric engines, the whisper of recycled air, the muffled clicks of laptop keys, and the low murmur of conversations that go nowhere. In seat 28A, a window seat, a small girl sat with a stillness that was unusual for her age. Amelia Reed, just 11 years old, appeared to be the textbook definition of an unaccompanied minor. Her dark brown hair was pulled back in a practical, if slightly messy, ponytail. She wore a simple gray NASA hoodie, comfortable black leggings, and a pair of worn-out sneakers with planets hand-drawn on the sides. On her tray table, a tablet was paused mid-frame on a documentary about the SR-71 Blackbird. We've all seen that kid on a plane, right? Quiet, lost in their own world, an island of childhood in a sea of preoccupied adults. Around her were the artifacts of her journey, a worn sketchbook filled with impossibly detailed cross-sections of jet engines and airfoil designs, a roll of high-quality drawing pencils, and a small backpack adorned with mission patches from Edwards Air Force Base, Nellis, and even a rare one from Groom Lake. A flight attendant, Sarah Jenkins, approached with the practiced ease of a 10-year veteran. She had the kind of forced cheerfulness reserved for children and nervous flyers, a vocal shield against any potential inconvenience. Holding a small can of ginger ale and the obligatory bag of pretzels, she crouched down, bringing herself to Amelia's eye level. "Hey there, superstar. I'm Sarah. I'll be your personal flight assistant today. You excited to see your grandparents in Chicago?" Sarah's voice had that sing-song quality, every word rounded and simplified, as if she were speaking to a toddler. Amelia looked up from her tablet, her hazel eyes meeting Sarah's with a directness that was slightly unnerving. There was an analytical depth there that Sarah, in her haste, completely missed. "Yes, I am. Thank you for the drink." Amelia's voice was quiet but clear, her words precise. She was polite, just as the airline handbook said a good, unaccompanied minor should be. Yes, she was polite, but what Sarah didn't see was the flicker of annoyance in her eyes, the subtle tightening of her jaw at being called superstar. "Now remember," Sarah continued, pointing a perfectly manicured finger at the overhead console, "if you need anything, and I mean anything at all, you just press this little button right here, okay? It's like your magic wand for the sky." She smiled, waiting for a compliant nod. "And if you need to use the little girl's room, just let me know. I'll walk you there so you don't get lost. These big birds can be a little confusing." Amelia's nod was barely perceptible. "I understand." "Thank you," she replied, her tone unreadable. She knew the layout of a 787-9 by heart, including the location of the crew rest areas and the primary avionics bay. As Sarah moved on, satisfied that passenger 28A was handled, the man in the adjacent seat, 28B, lowered his financial newspaper. Ben Carter, a private equity manager in his late 40s, gave Amelia the kind of indulgent smile reserved for harmless children. He'd spent the first hour of the flight barking into his phone before takeoff, and now, bored with his spreadsheets, he was looking for a distraction. "That's a pretty serious-looking documentary for a kid," he said, gesturing with his chin toward her tablet. He assumed it was some cartoon she'd accidentally stumbled upon. "It's about the J-58 turbojet engine. They used a triethyl borane chemical ignition system because standard spark plugs wouldn't work at high altitude," Amelia explained, her gaze still on the screen. "The variable geometry inlets had to be managed by an analog computer to prevent engine unstarts above Mach 2. Ben blinked. The barrage of technical jargon was so unexpected, so out of place, that he could only process it as a child parroting lines she didn't understand, a classic case of a bright kid showing off. "Wow," he chuckled, shaking his head. "You've got a great memory. Your dad must be an engineer or something, huh?" It was a question, but it was also a dismissal, a neat little box to put her in. "She's just repeating what she heard." "Something like that," Amelia said, turning her attention pointedly back to her screen, a clear signal that the conversation was over. But the signal was too subtle. Behind them, in 29C, an elderly woman named Clara Mayhew, her white hair set in a perfect helmet, leaned forward. She'd been watching the exchange with a grandmotherly twinkle in her eye. "Isn't she just the sweetest thing?" she whispered to Ben, her voice a fragile, papery thing. "So brave, traveling all by herself. In my day, flying was such a grand affair. You'd never see a child alone." Ben nodded in agreement. "Very well behaved," he murmured, turning back to his work, the mystery of the little girl solved in his mind. She was just a quiet, polite child, a pleasant anomaly who wouldn't cause a fuss. They had no idea that her silence wasn't shyness, it was observation. And what she knew could break their world apart. The flight droned on, a long, seamless stretch of time as the Dreamliner chased the sun eastward. In the cockpit, Captain Marcus Thorne and First Officer Isabella Rossi managed the flight with the relaxed precision of seasoned professionals. Thorne, a former Air Force pilot with over 22,000 hours in his logbook, had the calm demeanor of a man who had seen everything. Rossi, younger but no less competent, was methodically going through her checklists. "Weather over the Rockies is clear as a bell," Thorne noted, sipping his coffee. "Looks like we might even get a little push from the jet stream. Could be in Chicago 20 minutes early." "That'll make the bean counters happy," Rossi replied with a small smile, her fingers dancing across a control panel. "Less fuel burn, another on-time arrival." From their perspective, perched 7 miles above the earth, Amelia Reed was nothing more than a name on a list, one of 288 passengers they were tasked with delivering safely. Unaccompanied minors were common, a piece of human cargo with a special set of handling instructions passed down to the cabin crew. Yes, the flight was smooth, but in the sterile, controlled environment of the cockpit, they were blissfully unaware of the storm gathering just beyond their horizon. Back in the main cabin, the second beverage service was wrapping up. Sarah stopped by Amelia's row again, this time with a colorful Adventurer's Snack Box, another piece of airline inventory designed to placate children. "Thought you might like something a little more fun," she said, placing the box on the tray table. "Extra cookies inside." "Thank you, you've been very kind," Amelia said, her politeness a carefully constructed wall. As she nibbled on a cookie, she gazed out the window, but she wasn't admiring the cloudscape. Her eyes were tracking topographical features, noting the locations of restricted military airspace and civilian airfields below. What no one on that plane could possibly fathom was that Amelia wasn't just raised in a military family. She was forged in the crucible of an aviation dynasty. Her great-grandfather was General Robert Ghost Reed, a living legend whose ACM, air combat maneuvering, tactics were still the core curriculum at Top Gun. Her father, Colonel Daniel Reed, was a decorated F-22 test pilot. Her aunt, Major Jessica Reed, was an electronic warfare officer who wrote the book on modern threat evasion. Dinner table conversations in the Reed household weren't about homework or celebrity gossip. They were fierce debates about radar cross-sections, beyond visual range engagement envelopes, and the fluid, deadly calculus of a high-G dogfight. Amelia absorbed it all, not just with a child's curiosity, but with an inherited, almost supernatural intuition for the physics of flight. It was in her blood, a sixth sense for the sky. So, while everyone else saw a little girl with a sketchbook, Amelia was, in fact, a living repository of aerial warfare doctrine. She could read an instrument panel, decipher encrypted military comms, and identify an aircraft by the sound of its engines alone. She held a secret arsenal of knowledge she didn't even know she was about to deploy. The cabin lights were dimmed, and a mid-flight quiet settled in. People were sleeping, watching movies, killing time. In the cockpit, Captain Thorne was telling Rossi a story about a rough landing in Hong Kong. It was 2:47 p.m. Central Time when the world changed. The voice that crackled over the radio was calm, but with an undercurrent of tension that was unmistakable. American 44, this is Kansas City Center. Be advised, we are painting multiple unidentified contacts, high speed, converging on your position. Can you advise? The relaxed atmosphere in the cockpit evaporated in an instant. Thorne sat bolt upright, his hand hovering over the controls. Kansas City Center, American 44. Negative, we have nothing on TCAAS. Can you confirm those contacts? The reply came back, faster this time, the professional calm fraying at the edges. American 44, affirmative. Contacts are non-squawking, non-responsive. They appear to be business jets, but their velocity is off the charts. We are scrambling assets from Whiteman to intercept. Advise you maintain current heading and altitude. The words scrambling assets sent a spike of pure ice through Captain Thorne's veins. That meant fighters. You didn't scramble F-35s for a glitch on a radar screen. This was a potential threat. A credible one. Isabella, start looking for diversion options. Now, Thorne commanded, his voice low and tight. And keep it quiet. No need to panic the cabin yet. Already on it, Marcus, she replied, her face grim. But then the aircraft gave a slight, almost imperceptible shudder. In the cabin, no one noticed, attributing it to minor turbulence. But Amelia felt it. It wasn't turbulence. It was a subtle shift in the airflow over the wing, the kind of wake vortex left by another aircraft passing dangerously close. She looked out the window, her eyes scanning the vast, empty blue. She saw nothing, and that's what scared her. Stealth configuration, a voice in her head, her father's voice, whispered. A moment later, the captain's voice came over the PA system, a forced artificial calm that did nothing to hide the strain. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We've been advised by air traffic control of some other aircraft in our vicinity. As a purely precautionary measure, we have been asked to alter our course. Please return to your seats and ensure your seat belts are securely fastened at this time. Cabin crew, please prepare for maneuvering. The announcement ripped through the cabin's placid atmosphere like a shockwave. Murmurs turned into anxious chatter. Sarah Jenkins felt her heart hammer against her ribs. She'd handled medical emergencies, bomb threats, even an engine fire once, but other aircraft and maneuvering was chillingly vague. Amelia, however, simply closed her sketchbook. Her expression was one of intense concentration. She wasn't scared, she was processing. The slight bleed-through from the cockpit radio, the change in engine pitch, the captain's careful choice of words, it was all data. Then, a new voice cut through the static, a voice Amelia recognized instantly. It was the clipped, professional cadence of a fighter pilot. American 44, this is Striker 1. We have you visual. We also have visual on 3 bogies, tight formation, 1 mile off your tail, and closing. They are not responding to any hails. An F-35 pilot. The situation had just escalated from serious to critical. Striker 1, American 44, appreciate the assist. What are your intentions? Thorne's voice was strained. The response was one no commercial pilot ever wants to hear. American 44, stand by. We are moving to engage. Be prepared for immediate and aggressive evasive maneuvers on my mark. In seat 28A, Amelia's hearing, honed by years of listening to faint radio chatter in simulators, picked up a fragment of the transmission the passengers couldn't hear. Center, Striker 1. These aren't business jets. Profile matches a modified airframe, possible EW platform. They're painting the airliner with something. Electronic warfare, Amelia thought, her blood running cold. This wasn't a random encounter. It was a planned attack. Striker 1, center. Bogies are accelerating. They're on a collision course. I repeat, collision course with American 44. The warning was a death sentence. American 44, dive. Dive now. Hard right turn heading 270. Descend and maintain flight level 250. Go, go, go. Thorne didn't hesitate. He slammed the control column forward and to the right. The 200-ton Dreamliner, a graceful giant, was suddenly a plummeting brick. The world turned upside down. Screams tore through the cabin as gravity became a malevolent force, pinning people to their seats, sending unsecured objects flying like missiles. Sarah Jenkins, thrown against a bulkhead, fought her way to the PA. Brace! 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 Get your heads down! Stay down! But as she looked down the aisle, she saw something impossible. The little girl in 28A wasn't screaming. She wasn't bracing. She was leaning against the window, her face a mask of cold fury, watching the sky. And then she unbuckled her seatbelt. Amidst the chaos and the sickening lurch of the dive, Amelia stood up, bracing herself against the tilted floor. She made her way to Sarah, her movements sure and steady. They're not trying to collide with us, she said, her voice cutting through the noise. They're forcing us down. They're herding us into a surface-to-air missile engagement zone. If the captain descends below 20,000 feet, the F-35s will lose their look-down, shoot-down advantage against ground clutter. The tactical analysis was so complex, so utterly alien coming from a child, that Sarah could only stare, bewildered. Sweetie, you need to get back in your seat, now! The pilots are the best in the world. They know what they're doing. It was an automatic, instinctual response. A terrified child was babbling nonsense. It had to be. But Amelia's next words froze Sarah's soul. My great-grandfather is General Robert Ghost Reed. He developed the very counter-tactics those F-35 pilots are using. The bogies are spoofing their IFF, identify friend or foe. Signals to appear as civilian aircraft on our TCAS. We are flying into a trap, and in about 90 seconds, we're all going to die. The name Ghost hung in the air, a name that even commercial pilots spoke with reverence. At that exact moment, the fighter pilot's voice, now strained with urgency, crackled over the PA again. American 44, be advised, we are now painting multiple ground radar arrays consistent with a SAM battery. They're boxing you in. It was the precise scenario Amelia had just described. In that split second, Sarah Jenkins's world tilted on its axis. Every rule, every protocol in her training screamed at her to get the child back in her seat. But her gut and the impossible reality of what was happening screamed louder. This wasn't a scared little girl. She was their only hope. What do we do? Sarah asked, her voice a desperate whisper. Get me into the cockpit right now. Breaking every regulation in the FAA handbook, Sarah grabbed Amelia's hand and pulled her toward the flight deck. The other passengers, lost in their own terror, didn't even notice. In the cockpit, alarms blared. Thorne and Rossi were fighting the plane, their training and experience pushed to the absolute limit. When Sarah burst in with a child in tow, Thorne's head snapped around, his face a mask of rage. "Get that child out of my cockpit. Now is not the time." "Captain, you have to listen," Sarah yelled over the alarms. "She knows what's happening. She says her great-grandfather is General Ghost Reed." The name hit Thorne like a physical blow. He stared at Amelia, really looked at her, and saw not a child, but a terrifyingly calm authority. "Who are you?" he demanded. "Amelia Reed, sir. My great-grandfather is Robert Reed. My father is Colonel Daniel Reed. The bogies are using a coordinated EW attack to mask their intent. The F-35s are being jammed." Just then another transmission came through, this one calm and reassuring. "American 44 Striker 1, bogies are breaking off. Threat is neutralized. You are clear to level out and resume course." Thorne's hand instinctively went to level the plane, relief washing over him. "No!" Amelia shouted, her voice ringing with power. "Don't do it, Captain. It's a spoofed transmission. The voice signature is wrong. It's too clean. It doesn't have the compression artifacts of a military UHF transmission." Thorne and Rossi exchanged a look of pure, unadulterated shock. How could she possibly know that? It was insane. But what if she was right? The hesitation, that single moment of doubt, saved them. The real Striker 1 suddenly broke through the jamming, his voice panicked. "American 44, disregard, disregard. That was a hostile spoof. They are still on you. Turn hard right now." "My God," Thorne breathed. The little girl was right. He threw the 787 into another violent turn, the airframe groaning in protest. At that moment, another, even more unbelievable transmission came from the F-35. "American 44 Striker 1, can you confirm your passenger list? Is there a member of the Reed family on board?" The question was the final piece of the puzzle, a confirmation from the heavens that the impossible was happening. Thorne keyed his mic, his voice shaking slightly. "Striker 1, affirmative. We have Ghost's great-granddaughter in the cockpit. She's calling the shots." The reply was immediate, filled with a sudden, profound respect. "Copy, American 44. The General is a legend. His blood runs true. We're with you. Whatever the kid says, we do. Striker flight is yours to command." The cockpit of a 787 Dreamliner was now under the command of an 11-year-old girl. "Amelia, what's the play?" Thorne asked, his voice devoid of any condescension. He was no longer a captain talking to a child. He was a pilot asking for orders. "The bogies will expect us to continue diving. They'll make a final gun run from our 6 o'clock low, trying to stay in our radar's ground clutter," Amelia said, her voice steady. "Tell Striker Flight to perform a high-low defensive split. They can anticipate the attack vector. We need to initiate a maximum rate climb and execute a sharp left turn. The maneuver will expose our belly to the ground radar, but only for a second. It should be enough to break their missile lock." "A max rate climb? In this beast? It'll push the airframe to its limits," Rossi warned. "It's our only chance," Amelia stated, her certainty absolute. Thorne relayed the command. "Striker Flight, American 44. Our tactical advisor anticipates a final attack from our 6 low, recommending a high-low split. We are executing a max rate climbing left turn to break ground lock. Execute on my mark." "Solid copy, American 44, the pilot responded. "Your advisor is a ghost, all right. We're in position, waiting on you." "Mark!" Thorne yelled, pulling back on the column with all his strength. The massive airliner shuddered and then surged upwards, clawing for altitude in a maneuver it was never designed to perform. In the cabin, the G-forces were immense, but in the cockpit, Amelia was a statue of calm focus. 2 seconds later, the radio exploded with the sound they had all been praying for. "Striker 1, Fox 2, Fox 2, Splash 2 bogies, Striker 2, Splash the 3rd. All hostiles are down. I repeat, all hostiles have been neutralized." A wave of silent, shuddering relief washed through the cockpit. Distant fireballs bloomed and then vanished against the blue sky. It was over. Captain Thorne leveled the plane, his hands trembling. He turned to the small girl standing beside him, his expression a mixture of awe and disbelief. "Amelia, you saved us. You saved every one of us." Amelia nodded, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek, the first sign of the immense pressure she had been under. "My great-grandfather always taught me," she said, her voice barely a whisper, "that in the sky you don't have time for doubt. You only have time to act." First Officer Rossi just shook her head, laughing a little hysterically. "I've been flying for 15 years. I thought I knew something about aviation. How does an 11-year-old—" Amelia looked at her. "When your last name is Reed, you learn about angle of attack before you learn algebra. They always said the knowledge was a gift." I never understood what that meant until today. Sarah Jenkins, who had witnessed the entire thing, finally found her voice. "Amelia, I'm so sorry. I treated you like a—" "You treated me like a kid," Amelia finished for her, offering a small, tired smile. "It's okay. When I needed you to believe me, you did. That's what matters." As the Dreamliner, now scarred but safe, began its descent into Chicago, Captain Thorne made one final announcement. His voice, now filled with raw emotion, echoed through the cabin. "Ladies and gentlemen, I need you all to understand what just happened. Our lives were saved today, not by your pilots, but by a passenger. 11-year-old Amelia Reed, great-granddaughter of the legendary General Ghost Reed, used her incredible knowledge and courage to guide us through an attack that should have killed us all. Please join me in thanking a true American hero." The cabin, which had been silent with shock, erupted. The applause was deafening, a thunderous wave of gratitude and awe that washed over the small girl who had just saved 287 lives. Ben Carter, the businessman from 28B, looked at her with tears in his eyes, humbled and ashamed. Clara Mayhew simply wept. As the Boeing 787 touched down at O'Hare, flanked by the two F-35s, in a formation of honor, Amelia watched the fighter jets dip their wings in a final salute. The pilots in those cockpits knew. They understood the legacy she carried. The quiet kid in 28A was quiet no more. As the passengers deplaned, each one stopped to thank her, to touch her shoulder, their faces filled with a reverence usually reserved for saints. She accepted their praise with a quiet grace that was far beyond her years. The story of American 44 would become the stuff of aviation legend, a tale whispered in simulator bays and hangars for decades to come. And deep in the Pentagon, a new entry would be made in the classified file of the Reed family, noting the day the Ghost's legacy was not just continued, but reborn in the heart of a little girl 7 miles above the earth. Make sure to subscribe to Skybound Stories and check out our other amazing stories by clicking the videos on your screen right now.